made its triumphant return to the American road racing scene in December, and it was quite a weekend. It opened up with the Gold Wave featuring elite age group athletes, and then the pros closed the show the next day. 52.4 miles of racing, and it had a little bit of everything that you would expect from the marathon. Plenty of drama, elite level racing, some personal bests, fast times, some unexpected DNFs, and surprising results. And after he had a chance to sit down and catch his breath and reflect on the weekend, I had an opportunity to sit down with Ben Rosario, the co-founder and CEO of the Marathon Project, to discuss exactly what went down in the Arizona desert, and there was a lot to talk about. It's our wrap-up to the 15-episode Inside the Marathon Project podcast series. And the show is presented by Wahoo Fitness and the Wahoo Kicker Run, a winner of the 2025 Runner's World Gear of the Year Awards. The Kicker Run is not your ordinary treadmill. It's a revolutionary rethink of the traditional treadmill. It's engineered to bring the freedom and form of outdoor running into the home through dynamic pacing, terrain simulation, and unmatched connectivity. Welcome to the Inside the Marathon Project podcast. I'm your host, Steve Sievert, and version 2 of the Marathon Project is officially in the books. And joining me today to break it all down, reflect on a big weekend out in the Arizona desert is the co-founder and CEO of the Marathon Project and occasional co-host of this very podcast. So Ben, it's great to see you and have you back in a little bit of co-hosting role, a little bit of race director role to chew up what happened on what I think you'll agree was just a fantastic weekend out in Chandler, Arizona. As we are recording this, we're just over a week removed from race weekend. So I'll ask you just to kick it off. What are your big picture thoughts and reflections as you've had a little bit of time to catch your breath after the return of the Marathon Project?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for everything that you've done. I just wanted to say that straight off the top. For those listening, Steve was one of the folks who reached out to us early on and said, hey, I want to be a part of this thing in some way. And he and I went back and forth, and that the way that he became a part of things really grew. And not only, Steve, were you the voice of the marathon on race day, along with Molly Seidel and Scott Fauble and Josh Cox, you were doing the play-by-play, but you also were really the voice of the Marathon Project in the weeks leading up, hosting this podcast. And you did an amazing job on those podcasts. You did an amazing job on the broadcast. I've watched it. It was really good. And so thank you. So that's what I wanted to say off the top. To answer your question, how am I doing? How are my overall feelings? They're overwhelmingly positive. The emails that I received in the days after the race were so special, so meaningful. People that had an experience above and beyond what they could have ever expected, which was really mind-blowing. I was so appreciative of those notes and those messages. And you and I were talking beforehand about Instagram, everything that we saw on Instagram race weekend and afterward with the images and the stories and the emotions. The event was, I would say, an unmitigated success, and we were really happy with it. And it became even more than I thought it was going to be. It really became a destination race for the serious runner. And that sort of hit me on race weekend when I went to the hotel post race and saw people hanging out poolside, having a cocktail, eating a burger, reminiscing about the race. Their kids are sliding down the water slides at the resort. And I thought, wow, this is cool. This is cool. We've got something going here, and it's got legs for the future. And I'm overwhelmed and excited for 2026 and ready to put a bow on 2025 and get going on what the future is going to look like.
Well, thank you for the kind words off the top. I really do appreciate it. It was an absolute honor to be part of this event in the lead up on the weekend itself. And one of the things that struck me, because I wanted to immerse myself in as much as possible over the weekend leading up to the race broadcast Sunday morning, Spent some time, obviously, at the expo and the pre-race news conference and the authors panel. They're just right from the get-go seem to be a lot of energy around the event, a lot of really good feelings heading into the gold wave that you mentioned. And then the gold wave itself, I want to go into that in a little bit of detail after we chew up the men's and the women's pro races. But the smiles that I saw on the faces of the runners of the gold wave, that's something that really stuck with me. And then afterward, I'm hearing 2-minute PR. I talked to the father of an athlete who said his son just set a 7-minute PR. I mean, that is exactly what you set out to do for these gold wave runners, is deliver a pro level experience that gave them an opportunity to run as fast as possible. And granted, what I just shared was a small sample set, but overall, do you feel like you accomplished that goal in particular for the gold wave?
Yes. When you have a race that gets won in 2:19 on the men's side and 2:42 on the women's side, and what did I write down? 63 men under 3 hours, 84 total athletes under 3 hours.
Wow.
A lot of races would take that. A lot of races around the country would take that. So we were very happy with that, and yeah, even more so just the overall experience that those athletes had. They ran very fast, and that was certainly part of it. And they paid good money to have a nice fast setup with personal bottles and pacers, and we delivered on all those things. And then they delivered. They delivered the performances. Ultimately, we can only give them the opportunity, but they delivered the performances. And then I think the experience they had at the expo with other athletes, with their fellow competitors, so like-minded, such a niche group of people that are all sort of in this thing together. And then the communication that they had with myself and with Katie and in the lead up, I think that ended up being a big takeaway, that they really enjoyed that personal touch that our race can have, that other races can't have because they're too big, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like I got to know a lot of these people. I got to know Ernesto Villanueva, who was our final finisher in the gold wave, watching his wife run around the course, watching Ernesto, and then making sure that he finished and was good to go. And we talked afterward, and we emailed afterward, and that's not going to happen in most races. And so, yeah, I feel like the intimate experience that the race provided, the overall sort of resort experience that the race provided, and then of course the flat, fast course with personal bottles, indoor warm-up area, bag drop right at the start, atmosphere, energy. I think it was a hit. So we're excited that we achieved proof of concept. We're excited about what that means moving forward for 2026 and delivering on those experiences and those promises once again, along with our sponsors who were a big part of that experience as well. Of course, Blank Sports Nutrition, that's why the personal bottles program existed. Their sponsorship allowed for us to do that. And then Hoka came through in a huge way with providing all the gold waivers a pair of Rocket X3s, and what they did with the course and the atmosphere and the expo. People were taking, studio pictures of themselves. It was a total immersion in runner nerddom in a good way, in a good way. So yeah, we were all in hog heaven. It was awesome.
That is fantastic. Well, let's segue and talk a bit about the pro races now. And the tagline coming in, as fast as possible. And in many respects, you and the overall experience delivered on as fast as possible. We've already talked about how that happened on the Gold Wave. But I think, Ben, if you needed another tagline or a companion tagline to go along with as fast as possible, how about as unpredictable as possible? Oh my gosh. Let's start on the women's side, because unfortunately it was not a great day to be a top seed. We had Blanca Dorfeld, who we talked a bit about on the podcast for sure leading into the race. She was making her debut, a young German athlete, a lot of promise. Her training had gone really well up in Boulder, and unfortunately, because of an illness, she wasn't even able to make it to the starting line. And then as the race unfolded, a couple of other top seeds in Kellen Taylor and Paige Wood unfortunately had to step off the race course. But that opened up this amazing opportunity. And what was really one of the stories of the weekend with Priska Turono having come essentially out of retirement at age 45, and we hadn't seen her race much at all. The only thing we could find as we were handling this in the broadcast was, fortunately, Molly had raced her in September in Boulder in a half marathon. So Molly knew exactly what Priska could do out there on the race course. What's the backstory of her? Because obviously not even among the top seeds in the conversation coming into the race. And then not only does she win the race, I mean, she dominated. What's the backstory with Priska?
Well, her coach, Scott Simmons, emailed me a couple months out from the race, and we got her in to the field. We did not list her as one of the top seeds for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's my fault, but we didn't list her as one of the top seeds because she hadn't done a lot in a long time. The race that she ran in Boulder in September was at altitude, so it was tough to determine what that time really meant. And on top of that, when you haven't done anything in 5 years, it's just tough, right? And we had kind of already decided who our top seeds were, and so that's why she didn't get listed as one of the top seeds. But she was in the field for a couple months, and Scott kept telling me she was fit. He kept emailing me that she was really fit because he and I were talking about Paul Chalimo as well, and so he kept mentioning Priska. So I maybe should have known. He gave me plenty of strong hints that she was very, very fit, but yeah, that's the backstory. Is that he felt like she was fit and ready to race, and he liked what our race offered. And in terms of a flat, fast course where she could sort of prove herself that she was back, and we were glad to give her that opportunity, and she certainly proved him right.
And she really put on a dominant performance because she went with that early pace group running at a projected finish of 2:23 along with Paige Wood, and then made a definitive move right after 10K. And she just never looked back from there. I'll ask you to put your coach's hat on for a minute. Is this kind of the definition of talent never goes away? You've got someone who was a bronze medalist in the 2007. That's not a typo. It's 2007 World Championships at 5,000 meters, and Olympian in 2008. This seems like the very definition of talent doesn't go away, even at 45 years old and after a brief retirement from the sport.
Certainly, it doesn't go away. I think Father Time eventually wins for sure, with all of us. But when you were at that level, I think it would be fair to say she's not at the same level she was in 2007. She didn't run a marathon back then, but it's I think it's fair to say when you're running 14:35 in the mid 2000s that you're literally the best runner, one of the very best runners in the world, and so what she could have done in the marathon back then, who knows? But I think also, though Father Time does eventually win, the rate at which you see that decline isn't the same in everybody. You kind of don't know for sure how it's going to go. You got an athlete like Meb Keflezighi, who was still very, very, very good at 39 years old, winning the Boston Marathon. And then you had a guy like Ryan Hall, a contemporary of Meb's, who was kind of done in his early 30s. And so you just don't quite know how the body's going to react to the aging process. And obviously Priska is someone who is handling it very well. And maybe those years off helped, right? Maybe the fact that she took a few years off of high level training helped the body. And maybe that's why she's running so well at 45. I don't know. It's just one of those things, but it was exciting to see somebody of that ilk win the race. We want to make it mean something to win the marathon project. We don't want it to just be about times, quite honestly. We want it to be about winning and racing and the unpredictable nature of racing. And so the fact that somebody sort of came from seemingly nowhere, although of course we know what she's capable of, to win the race was really cool. And now our two women's winners all time, 2020 and 2025, are Sarah Hall and Priska Turono. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good company if you want to try to win the race next year and in years moving forward. And I think for us, it was a huge boon to have someone with that kind of background win the race.
Yeah, and a tremendous story. So she wins in 2:25:17, setting an over 2-minute PR at age 45. And then behind her, you had folks like Molly Grable, who finished second, and Jane Barakis, who finished third, to round out the podium, really capitalize on the tough day that a few of the other favorites had. In fourth place, you had Hannah Lindholm from Sweden, another Masters athlete who runs just over 2:31. And then rounding out the top five, a great debut from Mika Rivera Wood, who ran 2:31:35, making her debut at the 26.2-mile distance. Overall, your sort of thoughts and reflections on what ended up shaking out in the women's race.
Well, you mentioned it at the top. It's unfortunate to have a couple of big names drop out and Blanca not even being able to make the start line. There's just nothing you can do about that. It's just bad luck. She got sick. What can you do? But I do think that the race played out in such a way with Priska winning and running 2:25 that, there's certainly additional proof of concept there that the course is very fast and women can run very fast on the course. We just need a deeper field next year, really pretty simple, because we have to account for the fact that people are going to get sick. People are going to drop out. People are going to have a little niggle. Those kind of things are going to happen. And so we just have to put a little bit deeper field together on the women's side next year. But that's not to say that I was disappointed in this year. I think the Priska story was amazing. Loved seeing Molly get second. She was awesome. She was really nice in the buildup and all the email communication. Jane, same way, super nice. I took Jane to the airport afterwards. She was thrilled with the event. And Mika Rivera Wood in fifth, that was an awesome debut. And she's very popular on Instagram and YouTube and sort of an influencer / pro athlete, which is kind of a unique crossover. And she was amazing in the buildup, sharing her story and sharing her journey. And so I think a lot of people were excited to see her run so well on the day. And we'd love to have her back in the future and athletes like her that do such a good job of sharing and telling their story. And yeah, I think we set ourselves up well for the future. And I owe those athletes a debt of gratitude for believing in the event and putting on such a good show for us. And even the athletes that didn't have their best day, it wasn't as if they didn't try their best. They did, and these things happen. And so I'm grateful to Paige and to Kellen also for believing in the race and giving it their absolute best, which they did.
7 Olympic trials qualifiers for the U.S. coming out of the event. And that was, I know, a focus that you and your team had. You had a group of 5 pacers leading out those who were attempting to qualify at this event. If you were putting an over-under on the number of qualifiers in the women's race, how would 7 have netted out in terms of what you were thinking going in?
I mean, a little low, but we would have liked more. I mean, we had Jess McLean pacing, who did an amazing job, and we had, a story like Carter Nobo. So she made it, right? She ran super even, followed Jess the whole way. Jess was cheering for her as she came down the finish. Carter has tried several times to make it. She's got 3 kids. Her third child was born just 4 months before the race. So for her to make it finally, huge. We wanted more of those stories, and we will have more of those stories moving forward. I think that a couple things happened on the women's side. We had a lot of drops before the race, a lot of deferrals, a lot of people that for whatever reason couldn't make it to the start line. And again, I think we need to do a better job moving forward of getting a deeper field up front before the race, so that when you have those drops and things, it doesn't really matter, but it kind of hurt the overall critical mass to have those drops, those late scratches. And that's okay. We live and we learn from that, but we have to just get more numbers so that 7 becomes 17 or 27 or 30 or something of that nature. Because the setup was awesome to have all those pacers. We just need a little bit more of a critical mass in the group itself. However, stories like Carter were still there, and we were still very excited about how the race played out on the women's side. And I just think it's set up really, really well for the future. But no, we're so happy. Those are our qualifiers. I mean, they qualified at our race. That can't be changed. That's really cool. And so now I'll be a fan of those athletes for the next 4 years, 3 years, as they get ready for the trials.
That's what makes the marathon so special and so unique, different from track races, right? Not that folks who are racing in track don't have their own story, but so many of the stories that take place in the marathon are more relatable to the everyday runner, or more relatable to the elite age group athlete. And that just happened so many times throughout the Marathon Project weekend. Let's flip over to the men's race now, because it was a very different tale in the men's race. Although you had drama in both races, a little early drama on the women's side with Priska breaking things open, and then was she going to be able to make it all the way to the finish line? But on the men's side, the drama was a little bit later in the game, because you had a pretty defined group led by Nadil Wilschkit and Paul Chelimo, who went with that hot early pace being set by Rory Linkletter and some others, trying to get down to maybe even the 2:07 range with that early 2:08 pace. But then Nadil just later in that race, the second half around the 28K mark, breaks things open. Were you surprised to see Nadil, who making his debut, two-time South African champion at 10,000 meters, but first time going the 26.2 mile distance, were you surprised that he was the one that was in the shakeup at that point, trying to break that race open around 28K?
No, I wasn't surprised. I felt Nadil was one of the favorites for sure. I knew he was working out really well. FloTrack had gone up and done a Workout Wednesday video with him that was really impressive. I know what it means on Lake Mary Road to be running some of those splits that he was running. So I was very confident that Nadil would be in the lead pack and that he would be a protagonist in the race. Up front, I wasn't surprised that Paul Chelimo was a part of things, obviously, given Paul's credentials, but Paul's experiences in the marathon haven't been home runs, and so you didn't know for sure, but to see him in there was really cool and exciting for our race. Johannes Machman, I thought, would be a factor longer, and it wasn't his day, and those things happen. But then you had a guy like Stephen Jones who was in the pack, who you were like, what is this guy doing? But he did it. He was in the lead pack for so long. So that lead pack was really cool. But I know you're getting to this and you're setting me up for it, but what I started to see happen, because I was in the lead vehicle and I had my phone and I was looking at the app and the splits, is I could tell that 210 group, which was a bigger group, had more critical mass to it, was in striking distance, because they were quote unquote the 210 group, but from the beginning they were actually running like 209.12 pace almost every split. They were like projected finish 209.12, 209.12, 209.12. So it became kind of clear at halfway even that, hey, they're not that far behind. If these guys up front don't keep rolling, don't keep their foot on the gas, don't keep pressing, this group is going to have a chance to catch them. And that's what happened.
And I love going back to Wilschkit for a second. I loved his confidence coming into the race, because I talked with him on Friday a little bit about the Wednesday workout that you alluded to, and just how he was seeking some advice from his training group and getting a little bit more insight as to what it's like to run the marathon distance. And he said, compared to what I have to do on Lake Mary Road with that type of workout, this is going to be easy. And, you kind of knew from that, it's like, all right, he's never run 26.2 before, but he's got some confidence that he's bringing into this race. And he demonstrated that for sure, and ended up, holding on to third. But let's go into that 210 group a little bit, because there are so many different ways that you can win a marathon. And we see this breakaway among the women, and then we see unheralded JP Flavin sitting back there in that 210 group. He's 50 seconds behind at the 30K mark. And I loved his quote afterward. He said he was just sitting back there waiting to go hunting. And that's exactly what he did, trying to take advantage of the carnage up front. Smart way to win a race. This is easy in hindsight to say, though. Ben, do you think that Nadil and Paul and some of the others who actually didn't even end up finishing the race, did they go out a little bit too fast? And in retrospect, was it a little bit smarter for folks like Turner Wiley and JP and Ben Rosa to hang back and take a little bit more conservative approach in that 210 group?
Well, in hindsight, for sure, it's easy to say that Ben Rosa and JP and Turner Wiley made a great choice, because they ran great races and ended up in the top 5. And in Ben's case, a huge debut, in JP and Turner's cases, huge PBs. And so that's very easy to say that they did it the right way. But I don't think that necessarily means that the others did it the wrong way. I think Nadil and Paul, especially as long as they ran at 208 pace and how good they looked for that long, I don't think that was a crazy goal for them. The others, maybe they just weren't having their day. I don't know. I mean, again, in retrospect, if you're asking me in hindsight, how awesome would it have been if we'd have just sent that entire group, the 208 group and the 210 group, out at 209 pace? That would have ended up being probably the best situation. And that was what happened in 2020. We had a very, very large group at 209 pace that came through right at 104.30 and stuck together for a super long time and then battled home. And that's, I think, why you had so many guys under 210 in 2020. But though that's hindsight, I also think it was cool that we had that classic cat and mouse thing going on. And from a viewer's perspective, and probably I'd ask you from your perspective as the play-by-play guy, it was probably more exciting to have it play out how it did.
Yeah, it was absolutely awesome because we kind of thought, this was coming down to just Nadil and Paul, and then all of a sudden, I'm getting updates on my phone from you saying, "Hey, JP is closing the gap," and then he finally, I'll never forget, he finally came into camera view when FloTrack had a great shot of Nadil up front, and JP was coming strong, no doubt. So JP wins in 209.18, more than a minute personal best, representing Hanson's Brooks. And then you talk about unheralded. So Turner Wiley, and he was among the top 15 seeds coming in, but I don't think anybody had Turner Wiley on their bingo card for silver on the podium in second place. This is a D2 runner who ran at Seattle Pacific. Huge PR by over 2 minutes. He runs 209.27, and then a gutsy effort from Wilschket, who rounds out the podium in third in his debut. And then just to go on and finish out the top five, we talked about Ben Rosa a minute ago. He was fourth in his debut, and he makes a little history in doing so. He becomes a guy who has now run sub 4 in the mile and sub 210 in the marathon. According to my research, there's only about 35 guys in the history of the world who has done that. So that's pretty cool to have as part of the marathon project. And then Nick Hogger rounds out the top five. He finished in 210.18, another PR. So again, the tagline, as fast as possible, it certainly delivered on the men's side with all of these personal bests. And what I think back on it as I reflect on what you're trying to achieve with this event and what ended up happening on race day is this is a type of door opening race for some of these guys, right? This is now the JP's won a race and he did so very smartly. And Turner Wiley now, having never been close to a breakthrough like this, running more than 2 minute PR. This is an opportunity for these guys moving forward. Maybe their phone rings a little bit more often and some doors are opened up for them as other races are looking to build their fields. Do you see that happening for some of these guys?
Yes, and I said that on a couple of podcasts in the build up to the races. We feel like there was a place in this country for a race like this that on the pro side gave people the opportunity to reach the next level, to get the call from Chicago, Berlin, Boston, New York, etc., or at least to have them listen to you when you call them, and I think, having a 209 next to your name is a big step toward being able to compete in the majors. And so we want to continue to elevate the field that we have each year, but we want to be right below those majors in terms of the times that our race produces, the type of athlete that wins our race, finishes on the podium in our race. And those things take time, but this was a nice start. This was a really nice start. And I think I couldn't be happier for JP and Turner and Nadil and Ben and Nick. All those athletes in the top five just did such a great job. They ran so well. And I do think that their performances are big time proof of concept for what our race can do for someone and the opportunity that it presents.
And a couple other stories because, obviously a lot happened in the top five, but I think these are worth noting as well. You had Canadian Thomas Fafard, who was making his debut. He's an Olympian at the 5,000 meter distance, and he had a great showing. Didn't get a lot of maybe spotlight on the race day because he was in sixth, but he runs 2:10:30 or 29 rather, and that's the third fastest debut in Canadian history. So he had a great day out there. And I know we've talked a little bit about Paul Chelimo earlier in our discussion, but he ends up seventh, breaking 2:11. He runs 2:10:55. And I just thought it was fascinating to hear from him on Friday at the pre-race news conference, where you don't often hear elite athletes, maybe more so today than certainly back in the day, but be very reflective and open and vulnerable in things like a pre-race news conference. But I so appreciated what Paul said on the Friday before the race, where, and I'll paraphrase now, he said, when I asked him a question about, are you all in on the marathon? And he said words to this effect, even the greatest dancer knows when to step off the stage, speaking to his incredible exploits on the track. And he's serious about the marathon, and I think the training that he put in leading into the marathon project demonstrates that he wants to see how much tread is still left on the tires. And I would think he has to feel great about getting one on the board now in under 2:11. He has to feel really good about that performance.
Yeah, and I think the marathon project is a good place to debut, and it's a good place to figure out the marathon because the variables are limited, right? It's not a hilly course. You don't have to get shuttled an hour to the start. You don't have to deal with a tremendous amount of chaos on race weekend that maybe a big city, inherently presents, right? So the fact that the race is logistically easy for you is, I think, one of the reasons people run so well here, and a good place to kind of figure out the marathon. I loved Mika Rivera Wood choosing to debut here. I thought it was awesome for Ben Rosa to choose to debut here, Nate Deal, and for Paul to kind of make this a place that he kind of figured out the marathon after a couple of efforts that maybe weren't up to his typical standards. So yes, I thought Paul and his experience here, I think it's a good model for us, moving forward, to make sure that we're presenting ourselves to athletes like Paul as a chance to really, hey, like, come here, figure it out. You don't necessarily have to go to the biggest races in the world when you don't know this event yet. Maybe you should come here and kind of figure it out and get your feet wet first. So yeah, and I'm happy to play that role for people in their careers.
Bit deeper field on the men's side compared to the women. And as a result of that, you had 19 Olympic trials qualifiers on the men's side. And, I know you like to win always, Ben, but I would say when it comes to 19 Olympic trials qualifiers, that's the second most that has been produced by a race so far in this qualifying window, second behind CIM. Obviously, CIM does a tremendous job with that. But how do you feel about producing 19 OTQs among the men?
Yeah, I feel much better. Yeah, I feel much better about that number. It's a good number. That's a lot of guys. That's a lot of guys whose lives got changed. Who now can get ready for 28. And I think that number will grow. I think that number will grow. That I honestly think that because we're so early in the cycle, we also had a lot of people that just took a swing at something really crazy, that ran in the 214 group, ran in the 212 group, even ran in the 210 group, that maybe if they had just run in the 216 group would have qualified, no problem. But they took a big swing, as they say, and maybe paid the price in some cases, but that's okay. We want people to take big swings at our race. And I do think that, I use this term a lot, I just used it earlier, but we achieved proof of concept that we're a great place to qualify for the trials. And obviously our race is World Athletics certified, and it's a loop course, so it's no asterisk. and I think that does matter to some people, and I think that it's a great place to come and do that. I think we can accomplish both things, right? I think we can be a really fast race up front where it's a big deal to win, and it's an international field, and it's hard to win, and you're going to beat an incredible group of athletes if you do win. but I also think we can cater to the OTQ group and get an even bigger field next year in terms of that particular group, and a field that can really do it. A lot of people that can really do it. And yeah, I would love to see us maybe even double that number in 2026.
Well, that may be a good lead into my next question then. What is next for the marathon project? You're already talking next year, which is great to hear. Version 3 is going to be coming back. What's next in terms of what you want to achieve with the event, how you want to tweak things, take it to the next level? Again, we're just over a week out as we're having this conversation, but I know you well enough by now to know you're already thinking about new wrinkles or what you want to do to make 2026 even more successful than this year.
Yes, it's been a very busy week trying to create the game plan for 26. That's my document I have going, my working document, 2026 game plan. There were some learnings from the first year, some things I didn't expect. One of my big takeaways on the Gold Wave side was just how the overall experience was sort of this destination experience for the serious runner. So not only did they enjoy, of course, the race itself and the loop course and the personal bottles and the communication, but the resort, the Sheraton Grand was a big part of race weekend. And so I just think continuing to promote that race as a destination race for the serious runner is going to be part of what we do in 2026. I also think that we were lucky that we didn't get 1,000 people, because that would have been too many. It would have taken away from that personal experience, that boutique experience. And so I think the number is going to be 400 that we're going to cap the Gold Wave at. I also don't think we're going to do the lottery system in the same way that we did it last time. I think we're just going to do rolling basis throughout. So if you sign up, you'll know if you're in or not within a couple of days. And so we'll just accept people starting January 1st as they sign up. I think that we can probably still have it where if you run under 3:30, you're probably going to get in. The majority of our athletes were under 3 hours, but I certainly don't think we need to be that exclusive. I think that under 3:30 will work. I just think we need to keep as our North Star an incredible athlete experience, and we can't have too much lapping. And so that is one thing that we're going to work on and make sure that we get exactly right next year in terms of how that works when people get lapped and things. But we feel like with 400 we can absolutely do that. We can absolutely keep the personal bottle system. That went really smoothly. So those are just a few quick takeaways on the Gold Wave side. We need to probably move the time that the 5K takes place. So whether it takes place right after the Gold Wave, right after the pro race, or even at night, Friday or Saturday evening, I'm not sure. We're playing with all possibilities. We have another call today to sort of start to hammer that out and figure that out. So those are some of the things that we're talking about. You're always trying to get better. You have to be self-critical. You have to figure out what worked, what didn't, what can be better. We think the 5K has enormous potential, with Phoenix being the 10th largest metro area in the country, to have several hundred people run the race. We just have to figure out the right place for it. And then on the professional race side, just continue to promote what we proved in 2020, what we proved in 2025, which is that the course is really fast and that you can set monster personal bests here and really change your marathoning career. We think we proved that again with some of the names and performances that you mentioned earlier. And I just think, yeah, a lot of it is just being patient, which isn't always my MO, but I have said many times that it takes time to create a legacy event. So as pleased as we were with this year, and as excited as we are about next year, we also know that, hey, it's going to take several years before it's what it will eventually become. But we just need to make each year better than the year before with little tweaks, and that's what we're aiming to do in 2026, and really just continuing to communicate what what you're going to get from our race, which is you're going to get a group of people, meaning our ownership group and our staff, that really care about you as an individual and want to do everything possible to make your individual experience as wonderful as it could possibly
Yeah.
be. And we're able to do that because we have a small boutique race, and then work with our sponsors to continue to elevate that athlete experience, like our sponsors did this year. I mean, Blank's Sports Nutrition making that
Yeah.
personal bottles program possible was amazing, and Hoka with what they did with giving a pair of Rocket X3s to every Gold Wave athlete was awesome.
I mean, huge.
Totally justified what we said from the beginning, which is that we'd have the best swag in the business. And between the shoes and the quarter zip jacket and the backpack, we feel like we did that. And that's in addition to all the other things. And so we do feel like it was a VIP experience, which we had promised and will continue to promise and will continue to deliver on as we look to the future.
You set a high bar, and certainly seems like from everything that you've shared and what I personally experienced over the weekend myself, you not only delivered, but I think in many ways over delivered. And I couldn't agree with you more. Speaking firsthand from the experience at the 5K, I had an opportunity just to jump in that because I had a little bit of time to kill. And it was just really cool how you were able to be out there in the 5K on the race course, take advantage of a super lightning fast course, and you had a good field out there with some competitive athletes, and totally agree with you. I think that has a lot of potential moving forward. One change that you've already made, and we haven't had a chance to talk about this, so I'll ask you on the way out. The date has changed a bit in terms of where it falls on the calendar for 2026. It's going to be the weekend of the 12th and the 13th. What's behind moving the date up a little bit into the month of December?
I think I think it was just evaluating the pros and cons of the weekend that we chose for this year. You're right up against the holiday, the Christmas holiday. And there's a pro to that because then you're done. Most people have those 2 weeks off, or they work a lot less during those 2 weeks. And so it's kind of neat to have your marathon and then just be done. But, you know, there's also challenges. There's also negatives because then it feels like it cuts into your holiday a little bit, potentially. And the airport is busier. Phoenix gets a lot of travelers that time of year. And so I just think 1 week earlier, it will sort of eliminate all the negatives without really eliminating any of the positives. It's still great weather. It's still a beautiful time of year to be in Phoenix. It's the pool is still going to be awesome at 2 in the afternoon after the race. Yeah, I don't. There's just really no negatives to moving it back 1 week. And yeah, I think it'll just be easier for our race management team, so they're not right up against the holiday. Just way more positives than negatives to move it back. So yeah, excited about that move for sure. And I hope that shows people that, as we did many times throughout this year, that we're always willing to do what it takes to make this the best event possible. We're not stubborn. We're open and we're nimble, and we can be that way because we're a boutique event.
One of the things that certainly makes this event very unique. Well, Ben, congratulations to you and your team. I know how much effort goes into putting on an event like this. And again, everything that I saw and certainly experienced myself as a participant was absolutely first class. Congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you so much. And if we could do 2 minutes more, I would love to just hear about your experience on the broadcast, because I have to say that the FloTrack and the FloTrack partnership was such a big part of the weekend for us. Not only race weekend itself, but in the lead-in, the podcast, the Workout Wednesday videos, allowing us to tell the story of the race in advance of the race. That was one of our really, really big goals. And I think you and FloTrack, we were able to do that. And of course, the culmination of all that storytelling was the the 3 hours of the broadcast. And so just not being in the booth myself, only being in the car, texting you guys, tell me about the broadcast.
It was an absolute treat to work with the Flow team and have an opportunity to sit alongside Molly and Scott, who I thought did a fantastic job of accomplishing exactly what you and I were talking about at the very outset of, well, what does this broadcast look like? And you were adamant about this is not going to be a cheerleader type broadcast. This is going to be a sporting event. And I'll do what I do in terms of the play-by-play piece, but where that really happens is the commentators bringing that insight into the discussion. And, I asked a number of times of both Molly and Scott, I mean, is this the right move? What's going through their heads at this point? I mean, has Priska, gotten a little too aggressive too early? And because they have the experience of being out there in big championship races and Molly on the Olympic stage, I thought they were absolutely fantastic and just were able to share a lot of insight and, frankly, very candid insight that you might not get on other broadcasts. I know that's something that you and FloTrack wanted to accomplish, and I think in particular because of Molly and Scott's ability to do that, it was very successful in that regard. I mean, the shots, the drone shots were just, I mean, amazing and so helpful for me as the broadcaster because obviously, you can only get so much if you get that shot right in front of the field in terms of, well, how close is JP? I remember when he was coming around that slight right turn, but then you get the drone shot and you could see him closing on the deal. And I'm like, we've got a real shakeup in this race on our hands. And to be able to tell that story and work with the folks at FloTrack who are obviously first class in what they do and know how to put on a sporting event. It was a fantastic experience for me and really do appreciate the opportunity to kind of dust off what I had done earlier in my career and have an opportunity to do it again with such a first class team. What a treat.
Well, good. I'm glad you guys had fun, and I hope to see you broadcasting a lot more as you move forward in this phase of your career where you're going back into that because you're really good, and we loved you. Our audience loved you.
Well, I so much appreciate that, Ben. Thank you very much. Well, look forward to bringing you more stories as the Marathon Project, as Ben alluded to, builds and grows and becomes not only that destination event for pros and elite age group athletes alike, but also becomes a legacy event, carving out a true unique place on the American marathon scene. It has been a pleasure to bring you the Inside the Marathon Project podcast series. Look forward to re-racking it again as we move forward to the third edition of the Marathon Project later this year. I want to say it one more time because I like closing out the podcast with it. It is one race, one project, one pursuit. And you know it by now. It is the Marathon Project.